with Jeffrey Epstein. We'll be talking to a lawyer who represented...
Airways sponsors the weather.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up after the break, calls for the children of sex offenders to be given support following the crimes of a close relative. We'll have a special report. And as Donald Trump sues over claims about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, we'll be talking to a lawyer who represented several of the paedophiles accusers. That's next. Welcome back. Now, let's get more on Donald Trump filing what he's called a powerhouse lawsuit against Rupert Murdoch, two Wall Street Journal reporters and the publication's owner, News Corp. The US president has accused the individuals of defamation, claiming that they acted with malicious intent and caused him overwhelming financial and reputational harm. Let's bring in Joshua Schiffer. He is a lawyer who's represented several of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers and joins us this afternoon. Very good afternoon to you, Joshua. Just first of all, before we get into some of the details and some of the theories around this story, what's your reaction to President Trump deciding to take this defamation case against Rupert Murdoch?
It's absolutely on brand. It fits precisely in his prior strategies, a strategy that while millions of lawyers here in the United States say, oh, that suit is baseless, you're a public figure, he keeps winning them and winning big money.
Yeah, and it is a lot of money. I think it's billions of dollars involved in all of this. Now, it has been quite an extraordinary week in all of this story. What are your concerns, or what have you made of the kind of information that has been released, and clearly some of the information that hasn't, but may well be released by the Trump administration?
The really big question is what materials can be released in the future. We recently just heard there are no materials, and these are from our highest placed investigatory bodies, our FBI, our Department of Justice. And during the campaign, President Trump really ran on exposing transparency into this investigation because of all of the allegations. And what's happened is that we haven't had that transparency here in the United States. The chiefs of these different agencies have come out and basically told the American public there's nothing there. And that's very hard for people to swallow because of the prior evidence that even if we don't know the contents, we know evidence was gathered, and that evidence would be thousands of images. This new lawsuit basically confirms that President Trump can't get away from the Epstein issue, and his rabidly supportive base really wants answers.
But Joshua, isn't the bottom line here is that, as you say, some of these people who demanded that there must be something more to this story, who now have information about this, the Attorney General, the President himself, have essentially concluded that there isn't actually much more to say. Why don't we just trust them on this?
I don't believe people are trusting them, and that's the crux of the issue. It's very difficult for them to put forth with a straight face that there aren't massive volumes of investigatory notes, that there weren't hundreds of agents spread across the world investigating these serious crimes. There's the civil litigation on top of that. Some of that information was shared with various investigatory agencies. It's virtually impossible to say there's no there, even if it wasn't conclusory. You have to admit that piles of materials were created, they are being stored, and people have a deep, legitimate interest into what those materials include.
So the bottom line, there's obviously a lot of conspiracy theories, or a lot of theories, let's put it like that, swirling around this case. Your bottom line is that these will continue to kind of rampage, if you like, unless everything is published. Is that what you and others would like to see?
I believe more publishing is going to happen. We've seen a real upswing across the aisle, bipartisan, of groups demanding the release of some of this information, and that's going to continue careening forward until it reaches a head. And either the public is going to be told no, and that will spur furious anger across the grassroots, or we will get more information. I imagine we will get more information, but it will be metered out a little bit at a time because they can't release some of this information. There are victims involved. It would actually potentially be a crime to release some of this information. And remember, all of the complainants, the victims in the Jeffrey Epstein case, they've all been silenced through the Victims' Compensation Fund agreement, where if they wish to participate, which they all did, they're basically silenced forever from commenting on what happened in their individual cases.
But that's a choice that they made. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely. They were offered an opportunity to join a victims' compensation fund in order to preserve their anonymity, as also receive some compensation. And they basically all did. That, unfortunately, did not deplete the assets of the estate. And the Epstein family still retains hundreds of millions of dollars. But we're going to not hear anything from these victims who chose the pathway of anonymity. And that's hard to blame them.
Joshua, just in terms of lots of the theories swirling around about this list, a so-called kind of almost blackmail list that some are suggesting he has. I mean, we've heard from the US government essentially saying it doesn't exist. That's what they're saying. Well, why do people think there is one? Why?
Can you imagine a government spending this much time without creating lists? It's preposterous to think that there aren't lists. Now, the list referred to in the official statement, no, I truly doubt there is a formal list saying these are the people I'm going to blackmail. However, there are multiple compilations of groups that were associated with Jeffrey Epstein, both business and personal. These range from former United States President Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, actors such as Kevin Spacey, as well as many celebrities, business leaders. We've got Bill Gates, and we've obviously got Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, and obviously most of them are very publicly on the record, denying or trying to distance themselves, at least from Jeffrey Epstein. Just finally on Joshua, explain this to a kind of British or international audience. Why is the MAGA movement so animated by this case? What are they looking for here?
So one of the big motivators in both the Donald Trump elections was this undercurrent of child sexual abuse allegations, similar to what the UK has experienced with some of its most popular entertainers. It's the same over here. And those issues, they touch a cornerstone, a groundstone for American voters. And there's no excuse for the allegations of pedophilia or child sexual exploitation. It's a bipartisan issue. It's something every parent, every citizen in the United States is attached to. So it's difficult to talk your way off of the issue.
Okay, Joshua, we really appreciate your time there, live from Atlanta. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Darren. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Just to bring you up to date with a little bit of breaking news, and that is around Palestine action. Remember, there's been protests in several cities around the UK. Today, they've been prescribed as a terrorist organisation. Well, 55 people have been arrested in Parliament Square in central London.
One moment you're deciding between custard creams and bourbons, and the next, you're a millionaire. Get yourself in the draw. Lotto, will you be the next millionaire?
So 55 people arrested. We'll have more on that at 3 o'clock. Now, there are calls for the children of people who committed online sex crimes to be given support after it emerged that offenders were themselves given free assistance while their relatives were left to deal unaided with shame and stigma. Sky's Katerina Vitozzi has been speaking to a convicted online paedophile and his daughter, who was just 13 when her dad was arrested, about the impact. And just to warn, this does contain content that some viewers may find distressing.
When did you start looking at indecent images of children?
It was probably right around 2013. I just enjoyed looking at it,
Imagine finding out your parent was an online child sex offender.
I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. I was so scared that people would think that I would end up like him as well.
You might think this is rare, but it's happening to thousands of British children every year. So what would you do if it happened to you? Or if this was your child? Where could you go for help?
Is there enough support for children?
Absolutely not. Those children will absolutely fall through the gap.
What you're about to hear is disturbing. But we wanted to investigate why online child sex offenders get free, automatic help but their children are entitled to nothing. You'll hear from Ava, who was left with suicidal thoughts due to her father's offending. But first, from her dad, John. He agreed to speak to try and stop people from doing what he did and to get help for families. We've changed both their names to protect their identities for fear of reprisals.
I was on the internet on a chat site. Someone sent a link. I opened it and that's what it was. Then more people started sending links and it just kind of gathered pace from there, really. It kind of sucks you in without you even realising it. And it becomes almost like a drug to, get your fix sort of thing.
What was it about it that you found so compelling?
It was I just enjoyed looking at it. And at the time, you kind of don't think about what you're doing and how wrong it is.
After years of offending, in 2019, John was arrested. Police found more than 1,000 indecent images and videos of children on his laptop.
What was that immediate 24 hours like for you after your arrest?
I wanted to kill myself. It was the only way I could see out of the situation because your mind kind of runs into overtime. Then I'm thinking about my daughter, my son. How's it going to affect them?
This is where Ava comes in, then living with her mum and just 13.
We were out for my brother's birthday and we'd just been to Pizza Hut and we'd had a really good evening. And I remember being in the car on the way back and my mum got a call and she answered the phone and it was the police. I was so scared. After that, we found out that we weren't going to be able to see our dad for... Well, we didn't know how long we weren't going to see him for or even speak to him. I couldn't text him or anything. I was just wondering what's going on. I didn't know. I didn't understand.
Meanwhile, John had been released by police on bail. He was planning to take his own life until a call changed everything.
It was Friday afternoon and I planned to go and do it on the Friday evening. But I was given some leaflets at the police station of organisations that can help. One of them was an organisation in Leeds. I called up and I spoke to the chap who was very sympathetic and understanding of the situation and that I was in. And he said to me, "Have you got any thoughts of suicide?" And I said, "Yeah."
So do you think that free counselling, that support saved your life?
I think so, yeah. At that particular point in time, yeah, it kind of stopped me in my tracks, really.
But for Ava, the nightmare was just starting. She eventually spoke to her dad, who told her what he had done, but unlike him, there was no free professional help to deal with what came next.
When I found out, it genuinely felt like my world was crumbling around me. I didn't get offered any support. I got told that we were going to have to speak to social services at some point, maybe get interviewed or something like that, but then nothing really came of it. I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. I was so embarrassed of what people might think of me. It sounds so silly, but I was so scared that people would think that I would end up like him as well. I felt like this really big secret that I just had to hold in.
You can't share that with anybody. It takes a very, very brave man to go around sharing it with people because people can get killed for things like that.
And do you think your children carry that same sense of fear or shame?
No, they wouldn't tell anybody, would they?
I genuinely felt like the only person that was going through it because I didn't know anyone else whose parents had done something like that.
But the fact is, she's far from the only one.
Every month in England and Wales, there are 850 arrests for online child sex offences. And whereas those suspects, like John, can access free services like counselling for their children, there is no such support unless families can pay.
It's leading to children with serious mental health issues who are more likely to offend themselves.
Do you think it's fair or right that in terms of professional therapy and support, that offenders get more support than the children in these situations who are, much less emotionally able or mature enough to...
They're a lot more vulnerable, aren't they? I think they should get more support than the offender because nobody stops and asks them, really, do they? Nobody thinks about what they're going through.
If I'm being honest, I turned to drugs. I was doing lots of class A's and B's and going out all the time. I guess because it was just a form of escape for a very, very long time. There was a point in my life where I just didn't believe it was going to get better. I really just didn't want to exist. I was just like, if this is what life is like, then why am I here?
I understand that this is probably something that'll affect the rest of our life. You try and protect your kids, don't you? People try and protect their kids from people like me.
We asked the Ministry of Justice about whether these children should be classed as victims and entitled to free help. They told us, "We sympathise with the challenges faced by the unsuspecting families of sex offenders and fund a helpline for prisoners' families which provides free and confidential support."
But we've now contacted that helpline and they told us that they can only help these children if and when their parent goes to prison, which for online offences they rarely do. And even then, they don't offer a service like counselling. The Ministry of Justice also sent us a list of charities that they said could help. But when we contacted those charities directly, they said they don't offer services to these children.
Those children will absolutely fall through the gap. experienced it.
In 2021, Professor Rachel Armitage started Talking Forward. It's the only free peer support group for families in England, but even they don't have the resources to help under 18s.
So we'll have families that are paying for private therapy for their children, getting in a huge amount of debt to pay for that. So if we could get these children recognised as victims, as the Domestic Abuse Act recognised children in a domestic abuse household as being the victim of domestic abuse, even though they weren't a direct victim, so they get the therapeutic intervention, referral to school to let them know that something has happened which that child needs consideration for. But I think there's some sort of belief that these families are almost not deserving enough. There's some sort of hierarchy of harms, and the harms that they've experienced, they haven't been a victim of a contact offence, that it's not taken seriously enough, or that they're harmed enough, really.
In some ways, we're kind of forgotten about by the services, like you say, like it's always about the offender and there isn't really anything for the families.
There may be people watching this who are going through right now what you went through. Yeah. Is there anything you want to sort of say to those teenagers?
Sorry. I guess I just...
Why's that question made you cry?
I think because I probably needed to hear this at that point in my life. I had people telling me that there were people, but they'd never been through what I had been through. So I brushed it off, but I would tell them to stay strong. And it will get easier over time.
Well, if you've been affected by the content of that report, don't forget you can get in contact with the Samaritans at any time on 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. OK, this is Sky News Today. We're taking a break. Up next, though, we're going to hear from Daniel Dubois ahead of his rematch against Oleg Ozek at Wembley tonight, where he's hoping to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. That's next.